You're listening to a live in studio from 90.5 WUOL Classical Louisville, broadcasting live from our performance studio in downtown Louisville.
And good afternoon, I'm Daniel Gillum. Welcome to a WUOL live broadcast with the Kentucky Opera cast of their upcoming production of Rossini's comic opera, The Barber of Seville. Performances are Friday, February 16th at 8 o'clock and Sunday, February 18th at 2 o'clock. And there's also a final dress that students and educators can attend on Wednesday the 14th at 7 p.m. You can find out more info at kyopera.org. We're on Facebook Live right now. You can share a live video broadcast from our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical Louisville. If you've never seen The Barber of Seville, guaranteed you've probably heard it in plenty of commercials and movies, and of course in the standalone masterpiece, the Looney Tunes Rabbit of Seville. Please welcome Ian Dara, the General Director of Kentucky Opera, this afternoon to WUOL Live.
Thank you, Daniel.
Perhaps a slightly more refined version of Rossini's opera will be occurring next week. Ian, tell me a little bit about the concept for this production and how you got the idea to do this version of The Barber of Seville.
Well, it was very fortuitous. When we decided to do Barber of Seville, you wrestle with some of the questions about what can you do with something that's a little over 200 years old to make it interesting and relevant. And I remembered many years ago seeing a production in Chicago that had been directed for the Ryan Opera Center by Matthew Ozawa, and thought to myself, it was so innovative, it was so clever, and there was so much creativity going on in his ideas that I thought that would be the perfect way to see what we could do to liven up something that's 200 years old. So I approached Matthew about it, and he was very interested in seeing that concept come to a more realized production. So it was luck, I think. But it also is one of those things, you bring the right people together at the right time, and creativity continues to develop over the process. And it's been a great year in developing it, taking the ideas that were original to Matthew several years ago and seeing them grow with designers Sally DeLimbo and Andrew Boyce. And you add to that a fantastic cast that many of the people on stage tonight or this afternoon are making their Kentucky Opera debuts, but they are not strangers to these roles. So you've got a wonderful balance of new and innovation paired with seasoned veterans. So.
Well, we'll hear a little bit more later from Matthew Ozawa about his production and his vision. Before we leave you, Ian, tell us a little bit about next season. What's going on?
Oh, yeah, we just announced next season a couple of weeks ago, and I'm excited about that. Again, we have three wonderful operas, two classics. We begin with Mozart's The Magic Flute, which is a family favorite and beloved by audiences all over the world. And we then have a second opera, which is a Kentucky Opera premiere called Enemies: A Love Story by Ben Moore. And that opera started in workshop form with Kentucky Opera in 2008 and 2009, so it's wonderful to bring it back to Kentucky. And then our third show of the season is Verdi's tragic masterpiece Rigoletto, which hasn't been seen in almost 2 decades here in Louisville, so it's going to be a great opportunity to bring some classic operas in a world premiere.
Ian Dara, the General Director of Kentucky Opera. Thanks so much, sir. Rossini was an opera machine, almost literally. For almost 2 decades, he wrote 2 to 4 operas a year, completing 39 during his lifetime, not to mention a bunch of instrumental works. But you probably know him best as the composer of the famous Cat Duet. So search for that if you don't know of the Cat Duet. He's practically synonymous with opera, and often opera parody, thank you, Looney Tunes. And he wrote in the bel canto style of opera, bel canto, which literally means beautiful singing in Italian. It's a style that highlights the beauty of the voice, sort of no matter what's going on stage, it's beautiful singing no matter what, beautiful melodies. The libretto is based on a play by Beaumarchais, a Frenchman whose Figaro trilogy includes The Barber of Seville. It's a trilogy that you're familiar with too, because it also includes The Marriage of Figaro and another one called The Guilty Mother. Mozart's Marriage of Figaro was written about 30 years before The Barber of Seville. And another interesting fact is that there are more than one Barber of Sevilles. There are at least 3 other actual Barber of Seville operas that never quite made it, as well as Rossini's. So you could say that Rossini's Barber of Seville is sort of the prequel to The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart. Beaumarchais also was a pretty interesting guy, probably the most interesting man of the 18th century. He was a writer and an author. He was also a diplomat and a spy. There are stories of Beaumarchais aiding the Americans during the Revolution and even running a front company to supply weapons to the Continental Rebellion. Now let's get into the story and the characters. We have Count Almaviva, the young romantic. We have Figaro, the factotum, the jack of all trades, and the buffoons, of course, Basilio and Bartolo, and the heroine Rosina. The story begins with Count Almaviva, disguised as the lowly Lindoro, serenading Rosina, whom he's never actually met, outside her home. He's disguised because he doesn't want his wealth and stature to influence her love for him. He wants her to love him for who he is. The Barber of Seville, Figaro, enters singing his famous aria, which we won't hear today, Largo al Factotum. Yeah, you'll have to go see the opera to hear the famous aria. Figaro used to work for the Count, and it's a small town like Louisville, and he finds him and offers some advice on his way to weasel his way into Rosina's home. For our first musical excerpt, please welcome our Count, John Irvin, and Figaro, Will Liverman, both making their Kentucky Opera premiere. Will, before we get to the singing, tell us about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia, born and raised there. And I currently live in Chicago, Illinois, where I did my undergrad at Wheaton College and then my master's on at Juilliard.
Okay. So what's going on for you? I see you have some Papageno in your future, some new opera too coming up this year?
Yep. I'll be doing Papageno for the first time with Florentine Opera and then later at Central City. And then a relatively new opera called Fellow Travelers with Lyric Opera of Chicago.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk to John a little bit later, but Will, can you set up this first scene for us?
Yeah. So, just like you said, the Count has enlisted, he's basically hired me to come up with ideas to get access into the house of Don Bartolo, who is Rosina's guardian. She's basically held captive there, so I come up with these ideas, and at this point in the duet, I thought of a plan to help him get into the house, and so he's really happy because he's going to have Rosina soon, and I'm happy because I'm about to get paid. So, yeah.
All right. From the Barber of Seville, please welcome John Irvin as Count Almaviva and Will Liverman as Figaro.
Ma che d'amore la fiamma io sento,
sì, già sento.
guardo insolito questa macende,
Loro già
stesso,
bene,
giorni fa,
delle monete mi son già sento, delle monete mi son già sento, già bene loro, già bene l'argento, già bene loro, eccolo qua, già bene loro, già bene loro, eccolo, già bene l'argento, già bene l'argento, eccolo in nascascende, eccolo qua,
copro pis,
guardo insolito questa macende,
d'ardor insolito,
e di me stesso facciormi fa, già bene loro, già bene loro, già bene l'argento, già bene l'argento, e di me stesso, e di me stesso, e di me stesso facciormi fa, già bene loro, già bene loro, già bene l'argento, già bene l'argento, e di me stesso, e di me stesso, e di me stesso facciormi fa, e di me stesso facciormi fa, e di me stesso facciormi fa, sì sì, facciormi fa, sì sì, facciormi fa, facciormi fa.
Will Liverman singing Figaro, and John Irvin as Count Almaviva, music from The Barber of Seville by Rossini. John, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
You're one of these who is making their Kentucky Opera debut, but you'll be back next season, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was a surprise for me. I came into the Barber of Seville the last minute, thinking that I was going to come here next season for Rigoletto, which I'll be singing the Duke in.
Oh, nice.
But I was very excited because this production that we took from the Ryan Opera Center was actually my first time singing The Count, and it was with Matthew and Will. So I think it might have been all of our first times doing this opera together.
Mm-hmm.
Was it your first time?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was really special for me to
Yeah.
be able to come in and do that again with some old friends.
Yeah, it's a big old reunion, I guess. Then,
Yeah,
isn't it?
definitely,
Right, nice.
definitely.
Tell us about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally,
Mm-hmm.
but I live in Chicago as well. But I'm a vagabond, I guess.
I like all
All
opera
over the
singers,
place.
right? And speaking of world premieres, new music, you've got a couple under your belt too. Jimmy Lopez's Bel Canto and Thomas Addis's Exterminating Angel.
Yeah, we did Bel Canto in Chicago, and I just finished with the run of Exterminating Angel at the Met, but I was there for the first premiere
In Salzburg.
the Salzburg
Yeah,
Festival.
wonderful.
Yeah, so I've been following that show around for a couple years now.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been fun.
terrific. Well, thank you very much, John. Nice to have you here today.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Megan Marino is singing Rosina, and she is not going to be singing her famous aria. See, I'm sorry, you'll have to ask for a refund. You'll have to come to the show to hear her sing Una voce poco fa. Megan, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So glad to have you. You'll get to hear her sing with some of the ensembles. But first off, tell us who you are, where you're from.
I'm kind of from many different places, but currently my home is in Lyons, Colorado. I did my master's at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I never left. I kind of was in and out of there for almost 12 years now, and you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Love the mountains.
Yeah.
So originally from Philadelphia, and also I live like a vagabond, like most.
Like most,
Yeah.
right. You've got some good stuff coming up, a debut at the Paris National Opera
Yeah, I'm
in Parsifal,
excited.
right?
Yeah, it'll be great.
And you've sung a lot of Rossini in your career.
Yes, I have an affinity for singing fast and improvisation. I actually started most of my musical education in musical theater and jazz, and so when I was dragged kicking and screaming to classical voice lessons, things like Rossini, Vaccai, really, those composers really appealed to me because it offered an opportunity to, you know, say what I want to say about the melody that I've just sung, you know, because there's within Bel Canto, which I don't know if you want to get into Cabaletta Cavatina now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Open that can of worms.
Right? Open the can of worms. So, so a lot of Rossini arias, or Bel Canto arias in general, they have two large sections, the Cavatina, the Cabaletta. Oftentimes they're connected, especially in the more serious operas, connected by a kind of a choral interlude of some sort. The first section is the Cavatina is a more simple melody. Oftentimes it does repeat maybe one time, so you have an opportunity to kind of, you know, embellish a bit here or there. But then we get to the Cavatina, which is the more usually very fast, offers opportunities for the pyrotechnic singing, that very virtuosic sorts of, you know, moments that it will repeat. Oftentimes you'll get 4 repeats of a certain melody, so you have many different times to kind of play around within the parameters, you know, and there's, because we are, you know, it happened 200 years ago, there were certain rules about music theory as far as dissonant blue notes and things like that you want to avoid, but once you know the rules and you figured it all out, it's really, really fun to just play and noodle around, if I may.
It's a lot like improvisation.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it really speaks to my inner ornamental nerd. You know, I love letting that, you know, fire, and I can sit for hours at the piano and just crank out different ideas. 10 hours in the car on the way here from New York City, I actually wrote an entire new set of ornaments for the duet that Will and I are going to sing.
Awesome. Good.
So yeah, you know.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, so Megan Marino is going to be singing Rosina in The Barber of Seville, and you can hear her sing Una voce poco fa when you go see the opera itself. Will Liverman is back. He's going to join us for a duet, a scene with Rosina and Figaro chatting about Lindoro. Figaro encourages her to pass along a love note to give to Lindoro. Rosina has already thought of that, and she's already got the note written and ready to go. Welcome back, Megan Marino as Rosina and Will Liverman as Figaro. Will or Megan, do you want to say anything more about this duet? They defer to each other.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
No, just sing it. All right.
It's just
fun.
playtime. It's a little bit of dueling banjos in a
Yeah.
way between the mezzo
Yeah,
and the
it's
baritone.
like a game of one-upsmanship almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is not Will and my first time singing this together either. We did a production last season.
In my hometown in Virginia.
Yeah, in Virginia, together.
All right.
So, yeah.
Megan Marino and Will Liverman, Rosina and Figaro from The Barber of Seville by Rossini, live on 90.5 WUOL.
Dunque io son, tu non m'inganni. Dunque io son, la fortunata. Già me l'ero immaginata, lo sapevo chiaramente. Dunque io son, tu non m'inganni. Già me l'ero immaginata, rosa vivo pria di te, rosa vivo pria di te, rosa vivo pria di te.
Di Lindoro vago oggetto siete voi, bella Rosina. Siete voi, bella Rosina. Oh, che volpe sopraffina. Oh, che volpe sopraffina. Ma lavrare con me. Sì, ma lavrare con me. Ma lavrare con me.
Senti, senti, ma Lindoro per parlar come si fa?
Zitto, qui Lindoro per ballar vioron sarà. Zitto, qui Lindoro per ballar vioron sarà.
Per parlarmi, bravo, venga porta con prudenza. Io già moro di pazienza, ma che tarda cosa fa?
Egli attende qualche segno, poverin, del vostro affetto. Sol 2 righe di biglietto, sol 2 righe di biglietto, gli mandate qui verrà, gli mandate e qui verrà, gli mandate qui verrà. Che ne dite?
Non vorrei,
Su, coraggio,
non saprei,
sol 2 righe.
mi vergogno.
Ma di che, si sa, presto qual biglietto.
Un biglietto,
Sì.
eccolo qua.
Ah, era scritto. Ve che bestia, il maestro già su a lei.
Fortunati uffizi miei, io comincio a respirar.
A che in cattedra costei di malizia vuole far.
Tu solo morto sei, che mi devi consolare. Comincio a respirare.
Donne,
Ma tu
lei.
sei, devi consolare. Ma tu sei,
Megan Marino as Rosina, Will Liverman as Figaro from The Barber of Seville by Rossini. You can hear it as it's in its full context on the 18th of February and the 16th of February as part of the Kentucky Opera's. It's their last main stage production of the season. It's a live broadcast here on 90.5 WUOL on WUOL Live. Enter Dr. Bartolo, who is charged with caring for Rosina and has plans to marry her for himself, which is, of course, not weird at all. He suspects, though, this young romance between Rosina and Lindoro, a.k.a. Almaviva, and confronts Rosina about it. Dale Travis, welcome as Dr. Bartolo.
Thank you very much.
We've heard a little bit of Rossini's style, but what makes this aria so unique?
Well, in a lot of the Rossini operas, you have what you've already referred to as the buffo characters, which are the comic characters, but it's really important to remember that the comedy is not something that you play to the audience, but the comedy comes out of the reality of the situation. So we have an incredibly, insanely neurotic doctor in this production and in most productions of The Barber of Seville. So he has the thought that he can keep this girl locked up in his house and win her over with his charms so that she eventually marries him, when exactly the opposite happens. So a lot of times these characters are very blustery and they're very pompous because of the insecurity. Do you know anybody like that in real life right now?
Film at 11.
Yes. So what happens with these characters is they'll go on and talk a great deal about themselves, and then all of a sudden the emotions get so stirred up because the person is not doing what they want them to do, that they start these crazy raging patter sections, which is what Bartolo does in this aria that I'm going to do. So it's a lot of just very quick talking and just out of his mind and insane, and he finally controls himself and gets back to himself, of course. So a lot of these characters have that sort of thing going on in these operas. So I've always been a wordsmith, and I love to text and relating to the audience and communicating with the audience. So I've taken to these roles very well, and I do quite a number of them. So this Bartolo aria in Barber of Seville has that.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, great. Via carina, confessate, son disposto a perdonare. Non parlate, vi ostinate, non parlate, vi ostinate. So ben io quel ch'io da fare, so ben io quel ch'io da fare. Signorina da fondo con la barla di fuori, signorina da fondo con la barla di fuori, la canzone vittoria sul mondo saprà. Signorina da fondo con la barla di fuori, signorina da fondo con la barla di fuori, la canzone vittoria sul mondo saprà. E non c'è veloce smuri, faccia pure che t'amore, faccia pure che t'amore. Cause I'm gonna put the coast, I'm gonna put the name and nari, da matra. Cause I'm gonna put the name and nari, da matra. Andator della mia sorte non si lascia infinocchiar, no, no. Andator della mia sorte non si lascia infinocchiar. E Rosina innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, in sua camera serrata, finch'io voglio star dovrà, finch'io voglio star dovrà, finch'io voglio star dovrà, sì, finch'io voglio star dovrà, sì, finch'io voglio star dovrà, ci star dovrà,
I think I see what you mean now. So I'm curious, how do you start learning something like that? Is it just a lot of slow practice and then slowly
Yeah.
increasing the tempo?
Yeah, the basic technique is you break it down into its music's three components, which are text, melody, and rhythm. So what I like to do is just first thing I do is take away the music altogether and just study the text and look where all the exclamation points and parentheses are, and then you kind of get a feel and a flavor for how it should be inflected. And you just start off at a very slow tempo, just saying the dialogue. So it's, if you just start about this tempo, you go, Signorina un'altra volta quando Bartolando fuori la consegna servitoria a modo saprà. So then you go back and, you work that up and work it up till you get to about the right tempo that Rossini wants. So it's about Signorina un'altra volta quando Bartolando fuori, Signorina un'altra volta quando Bartolando fuori la consegna servitoria a modo saprà. Sometimes it works better than other times.
If opera doesn't work out for you, you could have a career reading the legal disclaimers at the ends
Yes.
of
Yes, that's
drug
always something to
commercials.
fall back on.
Yeah, sure.
So they get the words, and then you work the melody. In this case, it's a da dee da dee da 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 dee da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da.
Yeah.
Very simple melody, and then you look at the rhythm, and for this part, it's all 16th notes, so it's taka 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 taka.
Yeah.
But you just start slowly and just build up and work to where it needs to be.
Yeah. But you do have a great career in opera, and you're doing Don Bartolo later this year again, right? Glimmer Glass?
Yes, at Cooperstown, New York. I'll be doing the Glimmer Glass Festival there and doing the role again.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Dale Travis, thanks so much for being here
Thank
today.
you.
Like Mozart, Rossini's ensembles are pretty magical and pretty amazing to watch and to hear. A lot happens in the chaos, and here to help us unravel it a little bit is guest conductor Bob Tweeten. Bob, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Before we get to this septet, it is like a family reunion in a way. Is the chemistry on stage sort of easier does it happen a lot easier because they've all done this together before? Does it feel more comfortable?
I'm sure for them, there's probably some comfort that way. I think I've actually worked with everyone here too, as well. Not on this piece, but at different times. So it's really nice coming back to people you know, and it can work either way. We try to make it work either way, but it is certainly helpful to have people that know the roles, because there's we have a good amount of rehearsal time, but it's helpful to have that foundation so you're not starting from square one.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about your history conducting Rossini and preparing Rossini.
I've done a fair bit. I'd say this is my 7th or 8th production of Barbiere, so it's been in my blood for some decades. Cenerento's is probably my favorite Rossini opera. I've been lucky to do that a few times, as well as L'Italiana. I've also assisted on, assisted 2 of the serious Rossinis, and also conducted Ermione. So I've done about 6, which is a fair bit, but when you consider how many he wrote, it's kind of feels like a scratch, on not so much. But,
now, you're the head of the music staff at Santa Fe
Yes.
Opera, and also director of opera studies at New England Conservatory, right?
Yes.
What other projects do you have coming up?
Well, the first project is trying to take 3 weeks off after this, after a very busy year. And then I will do a piece by John Musto called Later the Same Evening with New England Conservatory, which will be my first piece there. And then we get into the Santa Fe season, so I'll be working on Candide and L'Italiana, another Rossini.
Another Rossini opera,
And then next year some get announced today, but
Good.
can't divulge those
Oh,
yet.
we'll wait to hear. Bob, can you set up this big ensemble piece that's coming up next?
Yes, we're doing about 3 sections of the Act 1 finale for you today. There's probably 5 or 6 sections in the finale. Rossini, his arias are fantastic. To me, the ensembles are, unbelievably great. Like the quintet in Act 2 is incredible. This ensemble is about 20 minutes. So it's the first time in the opera you hear a real extended section without any recitative. What's happened at this point is that the Count has come disguised as a drunken soldier. so he can get into the house. Now, Bartolo has said that he has a sort of a waiver that means he doesn't have to take soldiers, or drunken soldiers, for that matter. And so sort of chaos ensues. Then the kind of the town police come. We have our ufficiale here, who says, you know, what's going on? So the first little section we do starts as a real patter. Like, if you thought what Dale just sang was fast, he's going to do one maybe even a little faster at this point, and it becomes a little quartet. I mean, one thing that just to mention, I think, we've been talking about the text a lot, which I think is really important. Rossini was such a fantastic composer of, you know, beautiful bel canto melodies, but he worked with the librettist in a very short time to get text that suits, say, a beautiful long melody, or words that render themselves well in this sort of format, you know, like the patter. So we start with the patter. Then the next section, Fredda di mobile, the count sort of secretly shows to the official that he's actually the count, not this drunken soldier. So then everyone's like, what's going on? What did he say to him? And so everyone's sort of stunned. So here we get sort of a bel canto section. Again, it's a little bit like a canon. The first person sings, each person takes the tune, and then develops over top of it. But time sort of stands still for this little section. Then we'll cut a little section, because we don't have chorus today, or time to train you all to do it. And then we get to the big finale, which, you know, they're singing about, they're saying, like, my head feels like it's in a forge and there's hammers bashing and it's just making me crazy. The words are really potent. They're really interesting. And this section has what was a very typical Rossini thing, became known as the Rossini crescendo. And it's more than just a big crescendo. It always starts very softly. He adds voices one on top of another. He also adds instruments. And it starts with this little sort of germ of in the orchestra. They're playing triplets for the whole thing. It's a really taxing thing, actually, for the orchestra to play. But it just builds and builds and builds in sound and also kind of manic craziness. It's a really wonderful end to the act.
All right. Well, we're here in an abridged version of this 20-minute piece today with the cast from The Barber of Seville by Rossini. Welcome back, Megan Marino, Will Liverman, John Irvin, Dale Travis, Adam Lau, Clara Neiman, and Isaac Frischman to sing more music from The Barber of Seville.
Questo è pezzo di dotato, mi signor mamma dotato, sì signor, mamma dotato, questo è pezzo di dotato, mi signor mamma dotato, sì signor, questo è mamma dotato, sì signor, questo è dotato, sì signor, mamma dotato, sì signor, non mi vuole questo signor, sì signor, non mi vuole raccontare, io capisco che signore, questo pezzo di signore, questo cazzo di signore, questo cazzo di signore, questo cazzo di signore, inteso, ho inteso, galantuom, stai in arresto, fuori presto, via di qua. In arresto, io fermi allora. Vive, come respirare. tua fiato non resta a me dove spirar. Guarda, Don Bartolo, guarda, Don Bartolo, sembra una statua, sembra una statua, dal ridere, sopra il spirar. Fiato non resta a Don Bartolo, guarda, Don Bartolo, guarda, Don Bartolo, sembra una statua, dal ridere, sopra il gremar. Fiato non resta, guarda, Bartolo, dal ridere sto per crepare, dal ridere sto per
alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello,
alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello,
alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello,
alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, fa compare la monia, volevo rimamarsi, alternando questo e quello pesantissimo martello, fa compare la monia, volevo rimamarsi.
You're listening to excerpts from The Barber of Seville by Rossini with Kentucky Opera, who are presenting The Barber of Seville on the 16th and 18th of February. You can find out more info at kyopera.org. I'm Daniel Gillum, and you're listening to a live broadcast of 90.5 WUOL, WUOL Live. You can also find us on Facebook.com/Classical Louisville for a live video broadcast of today's performance. Thank you all to the great cast today. Let's welcome up Matthew Ozawa, who is the director for the opera. Matthew, welcome.
Hello. Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here and for bringing your vision to Louisville and to Kentucky. You've had a really diverse career. You've staged the classics, the Barber of Seville. You've also worked with innovative groups like Eighth Blackbird, and you've done new opera as well. Tell us about your vision for the Barber of Seville and how you bring your career to this opera.
Yes, as you point out, I do have a very wild and varied career in many of the differing mediums, working at Lyric Opera of Chicago and opera, Santa Fe Opera, Opera Theater of St. Louis. I'm actually making my debut with the premiere An American Soldier at Opera Theater of St. Louis this summer, and then also making my debut at Santa Fe Opera on Madame Butterfly. So doing a lot of world premieres and the classics. Whenever I approach the classics, I think what is very important is actually honoring the fact, the tradition from which it comes from. I am a musician, first and foremost. I went to conservatory for clarinet performance before I became a director. And so the music and unearthing what is there, in addition to unearthing what is in the text, is really important. Obviously, a lot of the work that I do is fairly experimental. And so as I fuse sort of my world with the tradition, I think that what is important is the storytelling and making sure that the storytelling is very, very clear, especially with comedy. Just as Dale was saying, I think oftentimes a piece like Barber becomes a lot more about all the shtick and the sight gags. And I think for me, it is important to root everything in the characters, what they're going through, and the journey of the story. When I first looked at this piece back at Lyric Opera of Chicago many moons ago, I was really interested in two different things. One, the fact that Rosina is locked up in this house. And in our modern society, I was really interested in exploring the idea of the empowerment of women. The other thing I was also very interested in exploring was the celebration of the act of creation, the celebration of the artist and what these incredible artists do day in and day out. So we have set our production in Cinecittà in Italy. It's a film studio. And so we are setting it in a backlot of a film studio. The Barber of Seville is the actual movie that we are filming. And our inspiration visually and aesthetically was Fellini's movie 8½. The sort of black and white, the tension between men and women, and the very sophisticated look of the movie that is both surreal, very comic, but also very serious, which is actually our opera.
Matthew, thank you so much for being here today. I think I'll have you back up a little later to talk about the final musical excerpt.
Sure, that sounds great.
Let's welcome back Adam Lau as Basilio, Will Liverman as Figaro, Megan Marino as Rosina, and John Irvin as the Count, and Dale Travis as Bartolo. But before we sing, Adam, welcome. Thanks for being here and for being here at Kentucky Opera for your debut with the company as well.
Yes, that's correct.
The theme for you singers seems to be new opera. You've done some new opera too, the Revolution of Steve Jobs.
I will
be doing that. Yeah.
Yes, next year with Seattle Opera.
Yeah, with a lot of other voices that have been here in Kentucky, Morgan Smith, Emily Fons, and of course Garrett Sorensen.
Right.
So tell us about what you've been up to and where you're from.
Well, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I got a master's in music at Rice University. And this year, it's been a nice mix of opera and concert repertoire. After this Barber, I do two Verdi Requiems, a Creation, and a Beethoven 9. And then Samson Delilah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fun, varied year.
Is there a lot of Rossini in your career?
I love singing Rossini, and has it been announced yet? I don't believe it's announced, but there will be in the next few years, yes.
Wonderful, good. Well, we can't wait to hear it.
Me too.
When it's announced. There's a lot of that today. I guess we're in an announcement season where things are starting to make their debut in light. Adam, can you set up this next scene for us?
Sure. So we're in Act 2, and basically, my character Basilio, he messes up the entire plot because the Count is dressed as a music teacher, and he tells Bartolo, "Oh, I'm the substitute music teacher, and Basilio, he's very sick, so I'm going to be filling in for today." And of course, this is so that Almaviva can see Rosina, his girl. And so all of a sudden, when Basilio enters, everyone's thinking, "Oh no, what's going on? We have to get rid of him, otherwise he's going to mess up this plot." So in this excerpt, what they first try to do is they try to gently usher me out of the room by saying, "Hey, you don't look very well. You look a little pale, maybe sick. You might have fevers." And so at that point, Basilio is very confused, but the Count gives him some money, so he thinks, something fishy is going on here. But they gave me this money, and they all want me to go, so okay, I'll leave, but not before I make them work a little bit harder. And so then they all sing Buonasera to me, and my character he loves the ceremony of it all, that he gets into the fun too.
Wonderful. Yeah. Welcome back, John Irvin, Dale Travis, Adam Lau, and Will Liverman, and Megan Marino for more music from the Barber of Seville.
Oh, yeah.
Con la febbre Don Basilio, chi vi insegna con la febbre a passeggiare? Con la febbre? E che vi pare? Siete giallo come un morto. Sono giallo come un morto. Bagatella, cospeton, che tremarella, bagatella, bagatella, tremarella, tremarella. Questa è febbre scarlatina. Scarlatina. Via prendete medicina. Chi prende in giro non vi state a rovinare. Presto, presto andate a letto. Non paura in vermi fate.
Dice vero, andate a letto.
Presto andate a riposar. Presto andate a riposar. Una borsa. Andate a letto. Ma che tutti siano d'accordo. Presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto. Non son sordo. Non mi faccio più pregare. E color, che brutta cera, brutta cera, brutta sai. Dunque vado. Buonasera, mio signore.
Buonasera, buonasera.
Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua.
Buonasera, mio signore.
Buonasera, buonasera.
Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua.
Buonasera, mio signore.
Buonasera, buonasera.
Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, vendicore. Buonasera, buonasera. Buonasera, vendicore. Poi domani si parlerà. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, mio signore. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore.
You're listening to excerpts from The Barber of Seville by Rossini, presented by Kentucky Opera. Almost done with today and all that you'll get for today. And of course, you have to see the rest of the opera on the 16th and 18th of February at the Brown Theater. Matthew Ozawa, the director, is going to set up this last trio for us with Megan Marino, Will Liverman, and John Irvin singing. What's going on here?
Yes, before I do, I must say something that's very interesting is that this entire cast of principals, Bob and I, are all making our Kentucky Opera debuts. And so it's a deep honor to get to be here, making our debut, and we have found such generosity with everyone who lives in Louisville and have been having a great time. And our time is not up. But yes, so to the trio. So at this point in the show, the very end of the show, it's our last ensemble before the big finale. The Count and Figaro, in a big storm, take a ladder, and they bring that ladder to Rosina's window. They come into Rosina's room, and the Count reveals himself as Count Almaviva. Oh my gosh. Rosina finally realizes who this man is. They fall even more deeply in love with one another. However, Figaro knows that time is ticking, danger is right around the corner because Dr. Bartolo at any moment may waltz into the room. And so he heads to the window only to realize that the ladder is missing and they are locked in this house. What is going to happen? I guess you'll have to see the show to find out. However, let's hear this trio.
That's a good tease. Thank you, Matthew. Please welcome back Rosina, Figaro, and the Count.
Presto. Andiamo. Presto, andiamo. Presto andiamo, vi sbrigate, via lasciate, qui sospiri, via lasciate, qui sospiri, presto andiamo, carità. Presto andiamo, carità. Se si tardi ai miei raggiri fanno fiasco in verità. Sì, fanno fiasco. Cospetto che ho veduto alla porta una lanterna, due persone che si va. Hai veduto? Sì signor. Due persone? Sì signor. Una lanterna alla porta, sì signor. Chi si va? Zitti, piano piano, non facciamo confusione, per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua.
Zitti, piano piano, non facciamo confusione, per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua.
Zitti, piano piano, non facciamo confusione, per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua. Per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua. Piano, per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua.
Zitti, piano piano,
Presto facciamo confusione,
per la scala del balcone,
zitti, presto andiamo via di qua. Per la scala del balcone, presto per la scala del balcone.
Presto andiamo via di qua.
Zitti, zitti, piano, zitti, zitti, piano,
Piano,
per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua. Zitti, zitti, piano, zitti, zitti, piano, per la scala del balcone, presto andiamo via di qua. Presto andiamo via di qua, via di qua, via di qua, via di qua, via di qua.
Megan Marino as Rosina, Will Liverman as Figaro, and John Irvin as the Count here on 90.5 WUOL, a live broadcast with The Barber of Seville by Rossini and Kentucky Opera. Thank you to the cast of The Barber of Seville. And of course, thank you to Arthur Bossarge for playing the role of the orchestra. There he is, yes. You can see the performances of The Barber of Seville on the 16th and 18th of February, and you can find out more about tickets at kyopera.org. Thank you for being here today, and thanks to Eric Matthews, our broadcast engineer, Kojin Toshiro, our house sound engineer, Tyler Franklin, our video producer, and Alan Brandt in the 90.5 WUOL studio. Thank you to our listener members who make this program possible through your contributions. Thanks to the City Cafe providing lunches to our members. Next week, in this space, we'll have more Kentucky opera with the studio artist, Isaac Frischman and Clara Neiman singing Brahms, Berlioz, Ravel, and much more with Arthur Bossarge again at the piano. That's next week at noon here at 90.5 WUOL. I'm Daniel Gillum. Thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to a live in studio from 90.5 WUOL Classical Louisville.